Hi, I'm Mike Zipser, and we are here with Fast Forward at Capclave, the Washington area science fiction convention at the Hilton in Gaithersburg. And with me right now is Genevieve Valentine,
Hi.
one of the guests of honor, and welcome to Fast Forward.
Thank you.
Let's go back a little bit. You grew up, I understand, in a military family with a lot of books.
That is correct.
Did you read a lot of science fiction and fantasy when you were growing up?
I did. Fantasy, I think, a little bit more than science fiction, but I think that's just the way that my family tended. Last Unicorn was the first book that I ever read all by myself, and I was 5 or 6 or something like that, and I wore out my first copy. And so my father has kept buying me copies over the years. Every so often, he's like, I assume that you've worn this one out. Here's a new copy. So yeah, I caught the bug young.
And when did you start writing stories?
Like good stories or just
did you like tell stories when you were a little girl?
Yes, I started telling stories a long time before they were good. I was the kid that would take the Barbie and the inflatable zebra and sit there and for 10 hours it was the amazing Barbie adventures of saving the zebra and running across the plains together, and since I was a kid, yes. Actually writing it, I think, started probably in middle school when my dad finally broke down and got a computer. Because before that, typewriting was never my thing. It was impossible. I had tiny little fingers. So as soon as we had a computer, I started writing. They started getting good several years after college.
And when did you publish your first story?
2007, I think. My first story came out in Strange Horizons.
And I assume you had a lot of things in the trunk before that?
Don't make me talk about the trunk stuff. I had so much. That hopefully will never see the light of day ever. Necessary practice, but truly terrible.
That's true. That's true. A lot of writers say you've got to write all the crap.
Yep, the million word mark before it starts to be any good. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you got your first story published, and things moved on from there quickly, I assume, immediately.
That would be an amazing story. What happened was I sold my first story and then didn't sell anything again for almost a year and a half.
Ooh.
After that, things, I think, got rolling a little bit. But it was a very interesting year and a half where I began to realize that it wasn't just luck at the draw, you get a story, it's all going to happen for you. So a lot of my knowledge of the industry and everything else happened during that year and a half, which was the research year that I should have done before I sold my first story.
But it's good to get that out of the way. You have to learn how things work.
Preferably before you start doing the thing. But yes, it's good to have it whenever it happens.
And then you had your first novel came out, which was Mechanique. The stories of the, we got it up? Circus Tresaldi.
Yes.
Which was a fascinating book. I got that when it first came out. I'd heard some good things. And it was this non-linear kind of steampunk circus story that kind of bounced around, which was a really interesting thing to do for your first novel.
Thank you.
Well, it's gutsy.
Interesting is a good word for it. I'm glad that I did it. I'm glad that I did it before I knew better, so to speak. You know, I had a few notes for it, and Sean Wallace from Prime asked if I had a novel, and I realized that I would have to write one in a hurry. And I sat down, and without thinking about what would work or what I thought was going to happen, anything else, I just started writing. Highly recommend it if you can do that. And I really loved writing it, and it remains, I think, one of my favorite things I've ever done, just because I was like, what can I get away with? Let's get it all out of the way right now. What can I do?
Get all the experimenting.
Yep, get it all done.
Because I was wondering, for your first novel, to do it in that kind of non-linear storytelling and moving between characters and all that, can't have been easy to pull together for your first novel out of the gate.
It didn't feel hard at the time, but I had nothing to compare it to necessarily, except the college novels, which we're not talking about. It felt more natural than I think it should have. And definitely it has things that I continue to find that I like returning to. Multiple character point of view. I like occasionally pulling back and doing the omniscient thing. I'm all over that. It felt like a sandbox. For a first novel, it was just a sandbox. It was I want to tell the story as strangely as I possibly can. Can I do it?
And it had the mechanical aspect to it, which you also did in your story Terrain that was in Tor.com.
I did.
I loved that story.
Thank you.
But let's talk about that story a little bit. It's I'm not. It's a Western.
Yeah,
It's not.
Western
Is it steampunk? It's not really steampunk.
It
but
has
it has
the
these
mechanical spiders, so you sort of have to.
Yeah, that you call dogs.
Right. But otherwise, it was a reaction to a lot of steampunk that I had seen that sort of glorifies all of the same old things in a new West that just has accessories. And one of my favorite things about steampunk is the potential that you have to push back against the dominant narrative of what happened the first time. So for me, it was a chance to tell a weird Western as it actually would have looked. And it turns out it was dreadful for quite a few groups of people. And so it was sort of a story from a point of view that even in the revisionist histories has gotten sort of marginalized.
Yeah, because it had a diverse set of characters. There was the Native Americans, Chinese, and Elijah, who owns the place that they have the mechanical spiders in that are used for. I thought it was a great use for that kind of a thing, which was kind of to take over from the Pony Express to go up to the areas they can't get to. And it's what happens when the railroad's coming in, which is one of the great Western
It's
themes.
the great Western.
Yeah.
It is civilization and connection in a place that there wasn't before, and like all of the good things and all of the bad things. And my story was all of the bad things.
Yes, which is not unusual in your work.
No, I write some sad stuff.
Yes, and I understand that was one of the things with the girls at the Kingfisher Club, which for a second novel is very different from Mechanique. It's linear.
Yep.
It's got some bad things in it and troubling things, but it doesn't end up bad.
It doesn't end up badly. The original story also doesn't end up badly. It doesn't have the same potential for darkness as like Snow White, where everything that's happening around you is just the most dreadful stuff, and the happy ending sort of comes out of nowhere. The 12 Dancing Princesses, even the original story, was very much about the relationship between the sisters, and then talking about a magical world for a while, and then sort of a real world romance that's happening in the story itself. So it was definitely a lighter hearted story for me to pick than I think a lot of my usual have been. But I wanted to see if I could do it. Can I write a story in which people are not dropping dead left and right?
I understand that was somebody said, can you write a story where everyone doesn't die?
My friend Anna, who I have known since I was 14 years old and has read everything that I have ever asked her to, finally was like, I love you so much. Can you give me something where everyone does not die? I was like, yes, I will work on that. And so she is the person that first got me hunting for a story that had a slightly lighter feel.
It's a delightful story.
Thank you.
What led you set it in 1927, kind of the Jazz Age, and what led to deciding to set it, because you were going to do a kind of modern retelling of the fairy tale. Mm-hmm. What led you to that time period?
It's the perfect time period to do it in. It was...
Yeah, but outside of that.
It was the watershed between the Victorian and Edwardian eras that still had like the very staid social contracts, and the fathers were in charge of the house and the girls had to sort of do what they were told. And then the 20s came along and women had jobs and they wore what they want and they went where they wanted and they drank all night. And it was a huge problem when flappers came out. All the satirical magazines were sort of having freakouts about it and trying to make fun of the flapper to make them go away. And they had a new voice in media that they hadn't had before. You had Flapper magazine that's actually talking back to the old fogies. The tagline of the magazine was "Not for old fogies." So it was a huge generational shift, and if we were going to make a very abstract concept very realistic, then what you had was a Victorian father who had given birth to a bunch of 1920s daughters, and for him it's perfectly normal for them to stay at home until he says otherwise, and for them they're looking out in the street and they're like, absolutely not. Like, absolutely not am I sitting in this house. And I said it in 1927 because it was sort of the height of the Jazz Age. It had already sort of started to make itself into a legend. You already had nostalgia for the beginning of the Jazz Age, and so it was a very story within a story year specifically. Plus it was after 1924 when everybody had panniers on their dresses, and it just would have been ridiculous to try and explain those to your father on the way out the door. Oh no, it just came from the catalog like this. No, it's fine. So for me, 1927 was absolutely the sweet spot where you could do a vaguely realistic version of the story that still had all of the archetypes that would be necessary.
And Prohibition was still going on,
Prohibition was going wild.
Which is really weighs in on the story.
Absolutely. Like there is no better time to sneak away to dance than when dancing is happening in the illegal places.
Yes, yes. And I also like the way the chapters tended to be songs or dances of the time period, and the way the dancing became this part of the story, what dances they were doing, and which sister liked to do which dance.
That took a little mapping, thank you. I got to watch a lot of hysterical old newsreels that were trying to teach you the newest dance. Half of them looked amazing, and half of them you were like, I don't know. The equivalent of the Macarena where everyone was doing it, and then 5 years later you're like, why? Why did we do that?
Must have been bad hooch.
And there was never a better excuse for bad hooch than when you were making it backstairs.
Yes. So the other thing that's interesting is you have the 12 sisters, and they had very distinct characters. They were distinct characters. That can't have been easy to develop, the sisters, with the ages, and, you had, it was Joe, the general, who was the oldest and started all this. And then you developed, as they got younger, the different personalities. So how did you work on, how long did it take you to get those developed? Did you design the sisters, so to speak, before you wrote the story, or did they come about as you were writing?
I think they sort of came about as I was writing. There's a tendency, I think, to assume in a story that every character is going to have a defining attribute, and that makes them very different. But often a defining attribute that's completely opposite on the scale can give you more in common than you think. And you see that especially in big families where it's infighting totally until something comes in from outside, and then all of a sudden they're all turned right at you, like, what did you say? So when it was time to sort of develop the sisters, it was a mixture of trying to find the different personality traits that would set them apart for the reader, which is very important to do so that you can be like, okay, this is the one that keeps track of the accounting, like absolutely. If I have nothing else, I have this. But a lot of what I wanted to do with them all together is to show how similar they are in certain ways and how alliances are made and broken and everything else, especially because the geography of their house, like the geography of their lives, is so limited that they're never out of each other's sight. Like they've grown up for years, never out of hearing of 11 other sisters. So what develops there is sort of this constantly roiling boil of people where, you're very different and things boil over, but you're actually the same and it's fine. And writing all of that was actually probably some of my favorite stuff in the book. Like just sitting down and writing a 12-girl argument, you're like, all right.
Now, did you come from a big family?
No, I only have one sister.
Oh, me too. Now, there were some of the younger sisters had never met their father. And I found that fascinating. Was that something you found out from your research?
No, that was artistic license. I wanted it to be that way, and it was.
Because you are the writer?
Because I am the writer, and it is how I say. But there was also that sense in the Victorian father of, Victorian parents often didn't see their kids, especially if they were well-to-do. You handed the kid off to a nanny, and you trotted the kid out at special occasions to prove that you were a good Victorian family. And then until they could bring you some kind of social standing of their own, you didn't have much to do with them. You sent them to the best schools because you assumed that was best, and you had the nannies when they were at home because that was best. So that kind of hands-off fathering happened to a lesser degree all the time. His personal animosity is what kept it completely separate.
Now, did you have a favorite sister out of the 12?
Oh my God, I was like, I only have one. She's gonna know. It's hard not to like Joe the best, but I think maybe if I had to pick a favorite, it would be Lou.
I was thinking that.
Just because Joe has so much going on internally that like I spent plenty of time with her, but Lou is the one where when she exited the story for a little while, not to spoil anything, but when she exits the story for a little while, she was the one that I kept wondering about. So if I ever revisited the story, I think that it would be with her.
Yeah, and Joe, there's a sadness in what goes with her because she's the general. She's the one that, manages to sneak them out of the house at night to go dancing. The cabs come at midnight, because that was her call. When she said the cabs come at midnight, The rest of them knew to go get their clothes on, but carry their shoes so they don't make any noise sneaking down the back stairs to go out. And the cabs came at midnight to take them to whichever club of the 3 clubs they went to, which does tie in a little bit with some of the classic fairy tale.
Right.
To go dancing as they all come in, and they are the princesses. They never give their names.
Never. It's too dangerous. I really liked writing Jo. It was not always fun because she's going through a lot, as you say. But I wanted to write a woman character who was in charge of a large family who was not maternal. I feel like there is often a tendency to, I don't want to say slap, but to assign a woman character the idea that she's maternal just because she is taking care of someone else. And there are so many ways for people to care about other people that aren't necessarily maternal.
Yeah, because Jo wasn't maternal.
Not at all. And it was very important to me. And I think the one time that I ever pushed back on my editor, who otherwise was a total dream and he's amazing, was when he wanted the back cover copy to say, Jo is the mother they never had. And I went, absolutely not.
Well, good.
I worked very hard to make sure she is absolutely not the mother they never had.
Yes. Before we run out of time and stuff, we still have some left, but
Okay.
I want to talk about some other fiction writing you're doing,
Sure.
which is Catwoman.
Catwoman.
Because you're writing the DC comic Catwoman now,
Yes, I am.
and she has changed her outfit.
Yes, she has.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Was that your idea?
It
Because you like costume.
I do like costume. I like it a lot. It was given to me as the idea for the pitch that now Catwoman is a mob boss, which I'm finally allowed to say because it drops next week, and I wasn't for the longest time. So people were asking, why isn't she in her uniform? And I'm like, I mean, sometimes you just want a break.
Casual Fridays.
I can't say, I'm sorry. And the idea was that Catwoman was a mob boss, but we wanted to give her something equally graphic, equally severe that she could wear instead of the catsuit that would sort of make her identifiable on the shelves and psychologically. And I said, can we give her a tux? Like, I don't want to waste any time with like fancy dresses or slinky dresses or anything else. Can we give her a tux? It's a symbol of power. It's the graphic black and white. And they said yes, and it's been amazing. Like, I am so excited that she has this other uniform now.
So how did you get into writing a comic?
I got a call from Mark Doyle, who is the editor at the Bat Office, and he said, I am trying to bring in some new authors to some books that have cycles that are ending or new books that I'm starting up. And I said, oh, okay. He says, you can pitch any of these that you want. And he named a couple, and I was thinking, okay. He goes, and we're looking for someone on Catwoman. And I was like, I will have a pitch to you in 20 minutes. It's like, what's the hook? I don't care. I'll have a pitch to you in 20 minutes. Catwoman, yes, done. Thank you, bye. And 20 minutes later, I handed him a pitch.
And he took it.
He took it. It took several months. I was not the only person up for the position, I think. But yeah, I got the phone call a few months later, and he said, okay, so let's talk more about Catwoman. And I said, yes, of course. How can I help you? And he says, when can you start? And I was like, oh my God, okay.
Oh my God, I'm going to write Catwoman.
Oh my God, Catwoman, okay.
That puts you into a pantheon of
Oh God, you're making me nervous.
that's gonna be great. I'm gonna get those.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
It looks really good. The pictures I've seen of Catwoman look really cool.
So excited about the art. I knew nothing about the modern comic book landscape in terms of artists. And Mark handed me Gary's portfolio and said, what do you think? And I looked at it and I was like, absolutely yes.
Yeah, that should be great.
He draws it in a cinematic way that I really like, and the scenes move a certain way. And he is so good with architecture. And it's a cliche to say like Gotham is a character all by itself, but for Catwoman, who spends a lot of her time sort of either at the highest highs or the lowest lows, this covers the entire city. We get neighborhoods that we've never seen before. We have the old money. We have the sort of very futuristic metropolis-looking skyscrapers that look very cold and like a mouthful of teeth. And he's brought so much personality to it that I couldn't even have imagined. So I'm really excited for other people to see it.
And you also have a new book coming out? Or comes out today or something as we speak? I don't know.
No.
No?
I hope not. I'm not ready. It should be coming out in March of next year.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yes, and it is called Persona, and it is a near-future political thriller that sort of reimagines the UN through the lens of teen celebrity culture.
Teen celebrity culture.
Yep.
And pop culture is something you know. You write a lot of columns on pop culture and TV and movies, but we are running out of time, and I can't get
Okay.
to talk to you about some of the stuff I really wanted to talk to you about. But besides, though, I wanted to talk to you about this because I love these things. Well, good luck with Catwoman,
Thank you.
and good luck with Persona when it comes out next year.
Thank you.
And it was delightful talking to you, and thank you for taking time to visit with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Well, that's it for another episode of Fast Forward. And from everyone here, this is Mike Zipser saying, take care.